This video is all about how to recover from crippling anxiety and depression. Welcome back to another episode of Irrepressible, ordinary people with extraordinary resilience. And in this episode, I speak to the incredible Tareq. Now, Tareq has quite an incredible story and an incredible journey. He worked in a high-achieving role as a high achiever himself, and yet found himself with crippling anxiety and depression that left him at the point of being sofa-bound. Since then, he's been on a journey of his own healing and self-discovery, having literally traveled around the world working with some of the best self-development and spiritual gurus known to man. Tareq's story is one that's really, really relatable, but also Tareq has lots of learnings and wisdom, and I really hope that you take as much as I did from this interview. If you do, and you're new here and this is the first time that you've ever seen this channel, then please make sure that you have subscribed and you've turned on the notifications so that you know each and every time we post a video. These interviews are coming out thick and fast, and this is yet another one full of power. So Tareq, how are you doing?
I'm excellent, thanks. How about you?
I'm good. I'm really looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to flowing with you and seeing where we go on this conversation. So before we get started, why don't you just quickly tell us who you are and what you're doing in the world today?
Well, my name is Tareq, and I am currently based in Dubai, in the UAE. I work in consulting. That's my day job. But I also am working on my passion projects, which will enable people in the future to get cleaner transformation. And that, I guess, we will get to as part of the questions. But I'm practicing a lot of my passions on this side in holistic well-being, let's say, in healing.
Amazing. Okay, good. I'm looking forward to getting into that as well. So why don't we dive straight in? Why don't you tell me a little bit about why you've had to be resilient and what was the kind of adversity that you've faced in your life?
Well, sure. I mean, it all started, I would say, the main event started like 5 years ago when I started going through a very difficult period of my life, a period I didn't know what to call or name or anything. But it turns out I was going through a depressive disorder. I was diagnosed with a major depressive disorder, and shortly after, I discovered that the sudden feelings that I used to feel were called anxiety attacks. Boom. And those anxiety attacks were part of a bigger umbrella of a generalized anxiety disorder. So as someone who lives in the Arab world, that was a bit shocking for me to go through a mental illness experience. And I've had to navigate through it ever since. So yeah, that's the topic of the journey, my journey.
So what did the depression feel like? When you say you went through a depressive episode, what did that look like, and what did that feel like in your life?
It's a good question. I mean, the way I remember it is spending a lot of time glued to a black leather couch in my living room, and then probably the rest of the time spent on my bed. But a lot of that time was filled with a lot of feelings of worthlessness, a lot of feelings of just being lost. Like there's no purpose to almost anything that I do. And a lot of that feeling came from the unhealthy understanding I had around life around that age. So I was around 20, I'd say 25, I think, around that time. And I did not have a good understanding of what life was. And that resulted in me spending a lot of time just simply not wanting to do much. And yeah.
And do you think the stigma sort of fed into that as well? Did you think that as a 20-year-old man, you should be able to do better, or that, you know, you shouldn't be doing what you was doing? Do you think stigma played a part in that way?
A massive one. Like, honestly, it played a massive one, because a big part of it is self-talk. If not all of it, actually, is self-talk. Because I always told myself that I had targets and I had to be doing things and I had to be productive and I had to be somewhere,
Mm,
not the couch, but somewhere completely else. And I guess, yeah, that didn't help much.
yeah.
And obviously the whole experience, which I guess we will get to in the next question, the coming questions, but that is like that opened a whole new cycle of shame because I am supposed to be somewhere, I am not, and I do not accept where I am, and I feel shame, and I'm unable to ask others for help, and therefore I have no other option than to go back to where I started the whole thing, back to the couch.
Yeah, and what you've described there is that cycle, right? The you feel bad, you're really kind of struggling with the ways that you feel, and then you start shaming
Yeah,
yourself for feeling like it, right? And then that takes you straight back to feeling like it. Yeah, that's
absolutely.
really,
Yeah.
really, really powerful. And was the anxiety all part of that, or was that something separate that you were experiencing as well?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I kind of woke up to all of them together.
Mm,
I I've tried putting a timeline to all those things and when they happen, but I think mainly anxiety started creeping into my life when I started a high achieving job, and I, as a person, am a high achiever.
mm,
And then I've had to spend a lot of time and effort doing that job, and yeah, I think that's when it started as something that crept into my system, and especially around the time of depression, the combination of the thoughts I had and the situation I had kind of like elevated the whole thing, and it became a very serious thing. Like started becoming like I didn't know what to do. Half of the
mm,
day was anxious, and the other half was just being so tired and drained. I'm sure you know how anxiety feels like.
mm.
Um, so yeah, it's just like you depleting all the energy you barely built up in your system while lying on a couch, just like pondering and thinking about things.
Yeah. Wow. No, listen, I really relate to that cycle of the just wanting to sleep all of the time, and then when you do feel any kind of being awake, you're just terribly anxious, right? And it just becomes
Yeah.
that cycle. So you know, it certainly doesn't look like you're in a place now where you're laying on a couch all day. So what happened? What changed? How did you start to, you know, go through whatever process it was, and what did that process look like?
Well, I I was sitting on the same couch, the same black leather couch, and I was just thinking about things in my life, and I said, okay, that's it. I don't think I can take this anymore. No more negative thoughts. And I at that point in time, what I really remember was the pleasure or the benefit that I will get from external sources or from help really outweighed the shame I had inside me not to ask for help. And I said, there's only one way to get out of this, or at least one way that I know of. So that was the first time in my life that I actually started seeking professional help. And the very first stage in this came as reaching out to a therapist online because that was the safest option given the feeling of shame and also the inability to travel and see someone. That was like a big effort for me to get like dressed up and drive all the way and see a psychiatrist. So I used an online service.
Mm,
Um it was BetterHelp, and I reached out to a psychiatrist and I said, okay, look, I am going through this. I can't move. I can't do so many things. And I little did I know, like I didn't know what was going on with me. I was like, I feel those physical symptoms. I feel those things. These things happen. Like for example, I sweat. I have a feeling of unease. I am unable to like produce anything or do anything from the heart really. And when I described all those things, she was like, well, yes, what you have is called generalized anxiety disorder, and that is mixed with depression, and we will need to talk more and more for us to get help. So that was the first step in the journey.
yeah. So it's always incredible because it often feels like failure, doesn't it? When we reach that stage, when we're reaching out, we think we're failing, but actually, what you're already sharing is that that reaching out for help was the first, that was a really resilient thing to do because you were finally getting what you needed. And was it a relief when you were told that you had generalized anxiety disorder and depression? Did it help you to know that it was something?
Well, I remember having mixed feelings, right? Because there's always a relief when you know what's wrong. But again, there's always more anxiety because you have to fight your anxiety. So those were the very, very first stages when I really started or wanted to battle the period that I was going through. So that very part I wasn't really relieved, but I was relieved when I started diving more and more into it. So I'm really happy because in my experience, I ended up going through more, let's say, new age and innovative approaches towards this, where I read a lot of things and I started learning what this is all about. And then for someone, I think I was 27 by that time, and then or 29 probably. But for someone who was in his late 20s to really discover something like, okay, I am not everything else around me. I am not my job. I am not my accomplishments. I am not whatever is in my external reality, because it is an external reality. And then discovering that I have a core and I have an untouched core, and that core is love. And that core is love actually inside. So that's that's when really I started getting all the relief. Okay, okay, these sciences are working. They're telling me something good. And that's when the journey progressed. I'll probably just tell you a little bit more about the journey, and then maybe if you have any questions, you can
Yeah, let's do it.
How does that sound for you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that period took 1 year of my life, and then what happened as well is I've started, like many other people, consuming a lot of like feel good content, a lot of educational content, but it's really just a YouTube journey, a lot of it, and I tried to learn a lot of things in that period, which helped me build a good base, like a good understanding of why we do things, why we do what we do, what are the explanations, and sometimes some good and useful takeaways to start handling the situation. But what really amplified my experience is stumbling upon a healing retreat that was held back in my home country in Jordan. That's where I'm from. Uh, and and I went there, and to me that was a super unusual experience. Like for a bunch of strangers to come together, to be so close, to go through an experience of examining and like actually going through their feelings and understanding what feelings were. Um, that was really awesome because to me that was something unheard of. Like feelings were shameful, like it was a shame to feel things, especially like to feel low vibrational frequencies. And a big part of this is cultural, and another big part of it is personal. So those mishmash kind of really put me in a bit of a tough position. But that journey kind of like opened a lot of doors for me to understand that I'm a vulnerable person, to understand what sensitivity is and what sensitivity is for men, or how we experience it as men, as highly sensitive people, as empaths. Um, and from then, I simply just started traveling the world and working with the best healers, best coaches, and best people in that field to just learn more every day, to help feel more, to help do release exercises and release work.
So you've literally been to different places in the world to work with different healers in order to be able to really lean into your feelings and emotions.
I should have probably started with that. Yes.
That's incredible. Give us a couple of
Yeah, I should
highlights.
have. I was just thinking about it because probably I should have started with that. But yeah, so like I worked I still work till date with a brilliant coach in Jordan. he's the one who taught me all about the feelings and how actually like imagination plays a very big role, how things are really stored in the subconscious and what are ways to start getting them out. And then he introduced me to the role of the spirit or the soul in the whole thing. And I was super skeptical at the beginning because to me it didn't make sense. I was like I was stuck in the left side of the brain. To me, it was all like sense and like operations and stuff. But that guy kind of unlocked that concept for me. And although I was a bit skeptical, he proved it. So I started working closely with him, and um, and then simply like things started changing for me. I started understanding how a lot of the beliefs that I have, a lot of the toxic beliefs, and a lot of the toxic experiences that I have in my day are caused by emotions and are caused by beliefs from childhood and at a soul level. And we just worked on letting them go very simply and very easily instead of like spending a lot of time uh, in a lot of like sessions where I just talk about things. And that's a lot of work I did back in Jordan with my coach Ihab. And I then traveled, like life started, um, like the universe started taking me in that direction. And I traveled to Romania and Wales, and I worked with one, if not, I think he is the UK's number one healer, Jerry as well. And with that guy, I learned a lot of principles about energy and a lot of ways to self heal and facilitate healing for others. And that was really super helpful for me. I also traveled to Bali last year and I worked with a lot of local healers. So to me, I spent like a whole month in Bali and I worked with almost everyone. Like I would just Google them and ask people around the street and just have a session with each and every one of them. And that was a good experience until I also sat with one of the best healers in Bali, and I think we spent like 4 days in total just getting out beliefs on a spirit level and releasing those beliefs and working on them. So yeah, and I mean those are the people I met in person and I worked with in person. There's a big number of people I worked with online from many places in the world, some from the US, some from Australia. Um, like at the time, I'm still working with everyone I mentioned. Also, I'm working with a shaman in Australia, learning like shamanism and modern, uh, like a modern way of shamanism, but a lot of ancient healing techniques as well. So I feel like I gave a lot of info, so I'll just give you the mic back to tell me if you have any questions.
I've got to pick my jaw back up. Genuinely, it's like I love doing this where I come in and I don't know, yeah, like honest, like before we started this, we just hit record, right? I didn't really know anything about you, and for you to come out and say that you've done that work is just incredible. And having done so much of the work like that, what do you think? If we're thinking about the people that might be watching this, like what do you think are the key takeaways that you would give to somebody that you would say would help them to be more resilient based on the stuff that you've learned? And people give so many different answers for this, so I'd be really interested to see what your key takeaways would be.
Yeah, they do. I mean, since we're flowing, I'll just simply tell you what's popping up in my head intuitively, because that will save people a lot of time. Like I remember when I said the first part of this story, what was really hindering my progress is acceptance. Okay, I couldn't accept the fact that I was going through an experience. Obviously, the words were different back then. It was like, I am this and I am that and I am depressed and I am sad and I am anxious. And then it was simply like just obviously an understanding what your words and also accept your experience. These 2 points are really important. Shortly after, like once you've accepted something or once you've identified it, really accept it. you have to accept where you are in the journey for sure. And that will help you be your own ally. Because if you really are not there for yourself, especially in the beginning, you are putting a lot of, like, you are really counting on a lot of people externally to help you in the process. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. But just realize that you are okay the way you are, and you accept what you're going through, because the moment you accept it, it is really easy to change it and transmute it into something else. And thirdly, just maybe you need to spend a lot of time, like, or some time at least, imagining the opposite of the state that you accepted, and see how much it resonates with you, for you to start working on a path of growth and path of development. And I think once you've done that work at the beginning, it becomes much easier, because then the world is full of good people who are able to help you in that journey or in that process.
Yeah, I love that. I love what you said about just the importance of that acceptance, of that. Here's where I am. This is what I'm feeling. Once we do that, what can I do about it? Until we do that acceptance piece, we're always fighting, right? And I think for me, that's what causes the depression, right? It's that running away. I mustn't feel this. I'm not going to feel this. And it's that acceptance piece that changes everything.
Well, I mean, look at it from a physics point of view, right? Like the easiest way to get from point A to point B is the path of least resistance. Okay, it's quite easy. It's simple physics. But what normally happens is that you are in point A. If you don't accept point A, and if you don't help yourself flow to point B, you are really putting a lot of the resistance that normally would have been you pushing yourself in the direction of point B. So if you accept yourself, and then you use your self-talk to your benefit, more and more, and obviously there's a process for you to learn how to do that, but you're guaranteed at least a smoother sail between those points.
Incredible. It's incredible. I can't believe we've eaten up 20 minutes already. I feel like I could, with the experience that you've had, I feel like I could talk to you for hours.
Yeah, we should at some point, maybe, because I mean, that was too intense. There was a lot of information, and it felt just like a bunch of headlines. But I'm more than happy to talk more in depth about any of those experiences.
Yeah, maybe we'll talk off camera on this, but maybe we do a live. I think do a live on Instagram maybe would be a really good thing to do, because I think you've got a lot to say.
Yeah.
Before we sort of finish up, and I know it's a short period of time to get so much quality information in the way that you have there, and I really appreciate that you've done that. If people do want to find out more about you, where's the best place to come and find you?
Well, for now, I'm putting more content on Instagram. So my Instagram, we'll probably share it after this. But it's Masarweh, my last name is T. I'm starting to put more and more content. So bear with me as I build up the topic, like find my way around it. But Instagram is the best way.
Amazing. And I'll put all of that stuff, I'll put all of the links in the comments of this on YouTube as well, so everybody will be able to see it. This has been incredible. My mind's been blown a little bit actually by the experiences that you've been through. So I'd like to share more of your stuff. So anybody that's watching this, watch out across our social contacts, because I definitely want to share some more with you. So thank you.
Sure, mate. My pleasure. And thanks for having me again.